Alrighty, guys. How did you like episode 6? I really liked it, actually. Even though we didn't see Beth, we kind of knew at this point that we wouldn't. But there were so many Beth callbacks, and so many specifically like dialogue callbacks. So I'm going to show you what they all are, and I mean, to me, this is just pointing to what's going to happen next. And as I always say, we're just on track to see her, even if it didn't happen this season. So let's just dive right in. We start with the scene where they sing, but first Laurent blows out the dandelions, and Daryl says, you know, where I come from, people say that gives you wishes. And then Laurent says that they call it, I didn't write down what it was, a French word, and it means that if you eat them, it makes you pee the bed. And then he says piss in the bed. I do think that's a callback to Still when Daryl had to take a piss, right? It's just like a way, there's a lot of other things in this scene that point to Beth, and it's just like another dialogue parallel. It was really random. I mean, when you think about it, who decided to have him blow out the dandelion? Who decided to randomly talk about pissing the bed? You know what I mean? Clearly it wasn't necessary for the scene, so it had to have been put there for a particular reason. Of course, this is where Daryl gives Laurent the guitar, and it's very, very important that it was found in the trunk of a car. So guitar equals Beth in the trunk of a car, right? Laurent asks Daryl if he's staying behind, and he says, you'll be all alone, and Daryl says, I've been alone before. Okay, that is a direct reference back to Alone, and the fact that he was alone after Beth was taken from him. So, I mean, Daryl's okay with this because he wants Laurent to be safe, and he wants Carol to go back and take care of him. So I think he really is okay with it, but at the same time, it's got to be wearing on him that he keeps ending up alone, even though he's volunteering it, and, you know, he really does want them to go without him so that he's the one that stays behind. But I think when he's saying that, I've been alone before, a lot of times, I think he's probably thinking about a lot of the time. I mean, he's right. He's been alone a lot. So he's thinking about probably more than one time. But because the episode was called Alone, in which he lost Beth, I do think it was a direct callback to that. Then he says, go ahead, play something, which just reminded me a lot of him saying that to Beth. You know, why don't you go ahead and, you know, keep playing? It was similar to that. And then, of course, Laurent starts playing the song, You Don't Always Get What You Want, but sometimes you get what you need. And Daryl sings, which is a fulfillment of the I Never that he never sang out in public before. So yeah, just in that one first scene, which is only about 2 or 3 minutes long, we have like 10 Beth callbacks. I mean, it's huge. So yeah. And of course, I didn't even mention that he's playing the guitar. That in and of itself, it kind of gets dwarfed by everything else. But the last time we saw Beth in Tyrese's death hallucinations, she was playing a guitar. So just mention that. All right, so then we go to Carol and Ash. Carol tells Ash that she's going to stay behind so that he takes Daryl and Laurent. Obviously, Daryl and Carol are not on the same page with this, but Ash is still obviously really pissed off at her. Then we have this scene where Codron and Fallou go to a chateau that was once converted into a hospital. Now, I'd actually kind of forgotten about the scene. It was in either the trailer or one of the promos. I don't remember which. And me and my fellow theorists talked about it. And then I just kind of forgotten about it, that it was going to be in there. One of those things where if they had taken it out, I probably wouldn't have noticed. I would have forgotten. But when they go, first of all, the hospital caught my attention, right? And we actually learn, maybe we knew this before and I missed it, but Fallou says that he used to work in a hospital, and I didn't realize that about him. So if he did say that when we first met him, I had just forgotten. But he does talk about working in a hospital, but they went into this place that was converted into a hospital, which automatically makes us think of Grady, right? We have this scene where there's a blonde walker that is tied in to a wheelchair. Several super suspicious things about this walker. First of all, it's blonde, it's female. We always look at that as like a Beth proxy walker, right? But it's also wearing pink, which we've said is a Beth color before. And the most important thing is just that it's tied into the wheelchair. So I've talked about this a lot in the past. You can find old metas that I did about this, but there were 2 episodes in season 4 that were about the governor, that was from his point of view before he came back and bulldozed the prison. It was episode 6 and 7 of season 4. And at the time, I think a lot of people thought those were maybe a little boring because they were about him rather than Team Family, and we only kind of sort of care about him, you know, but it was just them showing us what he was doing after he took off at the end of season 3. And that's also where we meet Tara. Obviously, she became a really big, important character. But one point, Tara and her sister ask him to go into a retirement home and get some oxygen for their father. And while he's there, I mean, there are immense Grady vibes. So it's another one where I point to that and say, they were already planning Grady in season 4. This is what I'm saying. When Gimple took over, which was technically end of season 3, and at the very least by 401 when we had the Bethel hug, Gimple already knew what her arc would be. He was already giving us foreshadows of Grady, okay, in a lot of ways in season 4. So there is no way that they just decided to kill her off one episode beforehand. That's just ludicrous. When you look at the symbolism, they were already planning what they were going to do, right? And this is one of the ways, because when the governor goes in to this retirement home, there are major Grady vibes, okay? I'm not going to go into everything that they were. There's about 10 of them. But one of the biggest ones is that there is a blonde female walker who is tied into a wheelchair. In that case, we don't really see the pink, but the wheelchair itself is yellow. And the biggest thing about it is that there are stigmata wounds on this walker's feet, meaning wounds that looked like she had nails inserted into her face or into her feet, like Christ being nailed to the cross. And the camera focuses on them, and we see the governor look at them and kind of like, I think he kind of gasps like he's shocked, and then he just moves on, right? And I was going, okay, there's no way that's not a Beth foreshadow. It's a foreshadow of her. It's a foreshadow of her being a prisoner. That's why she's tied into the wheelchair in the hospital or medical setting. And then the stigmata, because we always say she's the Christ figure and Grady represented her crucifixion, right? All of that. So obviously that was back in season 4. That was a while ago. And that was a foreshadow of Grady because it hadn't happened yet. Now, in this setting, it's much smaller, and the camera does not focus on it nearly as long, and it's not like zoomed in on the walker or anything like it was in season 4. But we still get this blonde walker that's reminiscent of that last one, who's tied into a wheelchair, there's pink, and it's in a hospital setting that reminds me of Grady. Okay, so to me, that tells me not only is it a callback to Grady, but I do believe everything in this episode is pointing to what we're going to see next season, what's coming up next in the story, as it were. And this is a big one, right? It's kind of pointing to that coming back around. So think about it this way. If you're looking for patterns, which we always are, then we had the Grady foreshadow, the Grady setting in 4A, the very end of 4A. And then 4B, Beth and Daryl were together, she was taken, and then we actually saw Grady in 5A. So it was only one season later, even though it felt like a long time because back then it was taking a year between seasons and all of that. So I would say the fact that we're having this now in season 2, it's going to be either season 3 or possibly end of 3, beginning of 4 at the latest before we see what this is pointing to. That would be my guess. Okay. They go upstairs and there's more Grady stuff. There are patients who are in blue scrubs or blue, I don't know if they're scrubs in France, but blue clothing, and they're tied into the beds. And that was something that we saw in the governor's one as well. And I think that just represents that they're prisoners, right? They can't get up out of bed and they're not being allowed to leave the hospital. And of course, Beth was being kept there against her will. So it's just an imprisonment sort of situation. And then, of course, Codron sees a cross, a rosary around a particular walker's neck and goes and snatches it off. Again, I think that this is to represent the crucifixion. I will say, and I know I didn't write them all down, but this episode had a lot of representations of the crucifixion. There was constantly like pictures in the background, things they were walking by, monuments, stones and sculptures. There was a ton of them. And I think at first I wasn't really registering it. So like I said, I know I didn't write them all down, but after seeing it 2 or 3 times, I was like, oh, that's a thing. And I'm not paying attention to that, So, I think I wrote a couple down, and I'll tell you what they were as I get to them. But anyway, remember that at Grady, Beth had a bracelet on that was a cross, and you could see it when she hugged Noah. So that was also to show that this was her crucifixion and she was the Christ figure. But so this calls back to that. I think they came up with a reason to have a cross in this setting in order to represent Grady. Also, Grady had the white crosses on the windows of the cars, Grady Memorial Hospital. The cross is like part of their name. But I also think that this represents that that's going to be cycling back around. We're going to come back to it. So all of that's just really important. That's a really big deal that we saw that. Now, to backtrack just a little bit. Wait. Backtrack and then backtrack again. Okay, so one thing I forgot to say was that I was going to go into Codron and, what is her name? Akila, which I will in just a minute. But Codron is kind of giving Fallou crap about it. You know, he's like, oh, love at first sight. And can I just say, I love Codron and Fallou. I thought they were hilarious that they're all buddy-buddy now. And I really liked them, like their dynamic and the fact that they were like kidding each other about stuff. Anyway, but Codron was just kind of giving Fallou crap about the fact that he clearly likes Akila and they're sort of flirting, right? And then when they see the walker that's tied into the wheelchair in the hospital setting, Fallou looks at Codron and says, that's your girl. And he's just like teasing him, like, you know, as if to say, oh, well, there's your girlfriend, you know, because he's giving him crap back because Codron has been teasing him. But think about it this way. That jumped out at me the second time I went through and was looking for screenshots, because Codron is a serious character. He's missing an eye. And Fallou is saying, that's your girl, as if to symbolically say that girl that represents is the serious character, right? So she's your girl. And, you know, no, I'm not trying to say Codron is going to fall in love with Beth or anything like that. But, I mean, just symbolically, I thought that was a really interesting thing to say. And it was very purposefully placed dialogue. So let's return to Fallou and Akila. This is something that I didn't pick up all the way the first time. So they are taking care of horses, and Akila says, I didn't write it down, but there's something wrong with the horse. I think it might be limping. And she said that means that it's dehydrated and it needs water. And Fallou says, well, you know a lot about horses. And she said, well, actually mules. My father was a farmer and I've taken care of mules before. And so then W.D. Way asked me if I thought there was some significance to that. And at first it didn't really register. I wasn't really thinking about it. But once she said that, I was like, yeah, you're right. There's probably something going on there. Well, to skip ahead a little bit for this particular symbol, later, after everything has happened and they all, I don't remember if it's before the plane. I would have to look at my notes. It's probably after the plane takes off. Anyway, because Daryl and Carol are on the bike and everyone else is riding in the yellow Jeep, and they say that the Jeep is overheating. And so she's putting, I don't know what it is, if it's water into the radiator or antifreeze or something like that. And Fallou says, kind of like the horse. So we have two different instances of something that needs water. It's not functioning well because it's overheating, it's dehydrated, there's a lack of water going on. So I also Googled, and I was asking which one needs more water or which one stores water better, the horse or the mule. And they said that really it's about the same, but between the two, a mule actually stores water better and can store more of it up than a horse can. And then the second time again with the Jeep, when the Jeep is overheating, she says it's too bad we don't have camels. Camels also are known for storing water, right? So we're not entirely sure what this points to. I do remember a time back in season, it would have to be 6, when Abraham and Sasha were dating. So it was kind of after they got together, but obviously before Abraham dies. And they're walking along talking, and he's telling her some kind of goofy story about being in the army and camels. And I don't remember what it was. I would have to go back and watch it. But I remember we talked about that and went, what does that mean? This is a random story that he tells her that has to do with camels, but now we're seeing another camel reference. So the only other thing that comes to mind is that in 510, which is where the music box wakes up, Team Family did have a major water drought, and they were really trying hard to find water before it finally rained. And the reason that's important is because it rained right before the music box woke up, which I think represents Beth's resurrection, and specifically Beth's resurrection in the eyes of the characters, meaning Daryl, and us, the audience, right? So I'm kind of thinking that this shows that there's going to be some sort of water issue again before Beth finally shows up. You see what I mean? So we have, from 510, we have this template, if you will, this chronology where there's a water drought. Then they finally get water, and then that's when Aaron shows up. Aaron is often a Beth proxy, and he says, I have good news, which is another way of saying the gospel, as in the Christian scriptures. The word gospel means good news, and then the music box wakes up. You see what I mean? How we have that kind of chronology? So we do know that there are parts of Spain that are very desert-like, and they are going to Spain to shoot. So we're wondering if Daryl and Carol are, like 5'10", if they're going to be in the desert and have no water, and this is just a foreshadow of that. That would make sense. And once again, we're on track based on the symbolism to where they should find Beth after whatever the drought ends up being. So anyway, that was actually a very small symbol and very subtle, but it ended up being kind of interesting. So kudos to WD Way for pointing that out. All right, what do we have next? Oh, okay, so they're in the hospital. Codron takes the cross, the rosary, off the walker. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say about this walker, it's tied to the bed, so it is a prisoner. It's clearly a male. It's not a female. It doesn't have a shirt on, obviously has a male anatomy, but it does have blonde hair, like really light, almost white blonde hair. So there is that. Then Codron and Fallou are ambushed by Sabine and her men. They want to know where the plane is, but Akila comes to the rescue with her bow and saves them, and Sabine gets away. And Codron wants to warn Daryl about them, and he says he knows where the plane is. So then we see Ash and Daryl, and Ash is looking for a hose of some kind for the plane. Daryl's trying to help him. Ash is being quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Just antagonistic, I guess, to Daryl. He doesn't want his help. I noticed in this part that everything was yellow. There's a lot of yellow in this episode, okay? But in this particular part, it looked like the underside of the hood of the car they were looking at was yellow, and then there's a gate that they go through, and it's where Daryl pulls him back because a walker shows up, is also yellow. There's just a lot of yellow in this scene. But they talk about Ash's son, and they talk about Sophia, and the biggest important thing in this part is that Ash gets a Beth line word for word where he says, you lose a wife or a husband, you're a widow or widower, but if you lose a kid, there's not a word for that, okay? Beth said that exact thing in 4A to Michonne at the prison. And this is something where, we talk about luck or we talk about I get it, but those are fairly common phrases that a lot of people might say. Now, I do not use that as an excuse to not talk about them because we know that every bit of dialogue is purposely placed by the writers. So just because they're common phrases doesn't mean that it's not important or that it's not, if it's not being purposely placed to call back to something. But this just goes beyond that. Okay, this isn't just a common phrase like I get it or I don't know, are we good? You know what I mean? It's way more than that. And it's like word for word what Beth said. So that's really important that they put that dialogue in there. So then, like I said, Ash goes in and Daryl pulls him back. I feel like there's something about that sequence I'm not entirely picking up on, but I'm not sure what it is. Maybe a foreshadow of something with Ash, maybe a foreshadow for something next season, but I'm just not sure at this point. But it felt like a very purposeful sequence right there. Then we see the stuff with Anna. Jacinta stops Anna, wants her help, and Anna says she will help them find the kid and the plane, I guess I should say, but she wants the plane and the pilot. We learn that Anna actually wants to go home. She's not originally from Paris, and like most people, she just wants to go back and see if she can find her family. But she doesn't feel like she has that option, but maybe the plane would give that to her. So there's also a really big home theme going on here, getting home, which is obvious. They're trying to get home. But we hear it said a lot, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. So then one of the things that Daryl says to Ash is that he came here to save a kid. He thought it was Sophia, Carol's daughter, but he can still save Laurent. So he still has kind of the opportunity to, in his own eyes, redeem himself because he always blamed himself for his son's death and not being able to save his son. But Daryl's going, but you can save Laurent, and that will, go a long way toward making up for it. And not that anybody really blames Ash. It wasn't his fault, but in his own eyes, if he wants to kind of overcome that feeling of guilt, then saving Laurent could help him do that. So after that, Ash is a lot more kind and friendly toward Laurent and kind of seems on board with it. Carol gives Daryl back his crossbow, so clearly he'll have that in season 3, which is good. And then they kind of argue about who's going to stay behind, but Ash sides with Daryl, and Daryl says she's outnumbered. So then Fallou and Codron show up to tell them that Jacinta is coming. And we see Anna leading Jacinta toward the track. She sees Paris, the City of Lights poster, and she remembers Laurent and talking with him. And it's pretty obvious that she's kind of leading them into a trap, and she's kind of hoping to help Daryl and Laurent get away, right? But it doesn't go very well because Jacinta's a little too smart. She's not like some idiot bad guy. She keeps making Anna lead, and so Anna's down in the garage with them when the walkers attack. Now, one thing that I did notice that was kind of interesting is that they pass a door that says sortie de secours, and I wasn't sure what that meant. I had to look it up, and it just means emergency exit. So Anna goes past it, and she looks at it, and she's obviously thinking she can get out that way. But then the walkers attack, and Jacinta is bitten on the arm, and Anna tries to get out, but she can't get the door open. So then she tries to run back, but of course they close her in, and she's bitten and is killed as well. But I thought that was interesting. Originally, I thought that door might have been yellow. I had to go back and look, and it's actually not yellow, it's blue, which makes more sense, actually. But remember that there was, like, no exit signs in Beth's cell, and there was a lot of talk about being trapped and whether they were trapped or not. She said to Noah, "We're not trapped." So that's a big theme, and it's kind of another way to go about this theme, is it showed that if she couldn't get the exit open, she was going to die. And I think that plays into Beth's arc somewhere, too. Beth actually did have an exit, so at least from a symbolic standpoint, it wouldn't have made sense that she died, because she did have an exit. Anyway, I was just thinking about that, and then it's kind of an interesting way to show that, because Anna couldn't get the door open, that sealed her fate. That's why she died. But there were, if you can get out through the exit, that's like important. Like if you think of 7/12, when it looked like Rick died for a minute and he went into the yellow ride car. I mean, there had to be an exit from that car for him to get out. That was a big part of getting away from the walkers, right? So I think that's kind of, it's just like in line with the symbolism. It's just an interesting little tidbit. So because Codron and Fallou show up, they all start getting in the plane. They say, "We gotta go now. They're coming for us," yada, yada. Everybody except Daryl gets in. And then we see Daryl and Codron and Fallou, trying to protect the plane as it's trying to take off. And Ash is trying to get to the runway, and there's a lot going on. And then Carol asks, "Are we good?" And he says, "Yeah, we're good." And she obviously gets off the plane at that point, although we don't see it right away. It did occur to me that conversation, that just, "Are we good? Yeah, we're good," could be a callback to Beth's song from season 4, "We'll be good." I don't know if that's what it's meant to be, but that's what it reminded me of. We have some guy on a bike that gets close to the plane. I love that at this point, Daryl is shooting with a yellow rifle. It almost looks gold. I really like that. I think that's a cool symbol. He gets the guy on the bike, but then there's the people in the Jeep, and he's out of ammo. And finally, somebody else shoots the Jeep down, and it's Carol. She got off the plane. I kept hearing a Friends dialogue. "I got off the plane," kind of in my head at this part. But Ash gets off the ground, and they wave to Laurent, and Jacinta then kills herself, and it's clear that Daryl is glad that Laurent got away. So then all of them, it's Daryl and Carol on the bike, like I say, and then Fallou, Akila, Codron are in the Jeep, and they go to the coast. And the place where they go is just a particular place that Fallou knows of. This is one of the places, there's a statue that has a cross on the top, and it looks like the figure of Christ on the cross. So that was one of the places that I noticed crucifixion symbol. This Scottish couple that Fallou knows, named Fiona and Angus, very Scottish names, show up. He met them at the Demimonde, which is the club that Anna is now running, or was before she got killed. And they're going to help them find their way to England. So this is the part where Fallou and Akila talk about the Jeep having overheated that I already went over. So then that night, they sit around the fire, and they're all talking. Fiona and Angus are talking about how they came to Paris to get married. They were young. They're asking about how it used to be. Then Fallou tells the story about how he used to work in a hospital. Okay, so before I get to that, there are quite a few romance themes going on here. First of all, there's Fiona and Angus, and it would be one thing if they were just a married couple or they were just, boyfriend and girlfriend, they were together, but they specifically talk about how they came to France to get married and how they found each other and all of that. So there's that. Then we have Fallou and Akila, which I'll talk about more in just a minute because they make out after this part. But if you think about it in terms of the entire series, I mean, Fallou's been on it since the first season. And here at the end, suddenly he finds love. I mean, it's a little bit random. I do think part of it is they wanted a reason for him to stay in France because maybe they just don't really have room for him in season 3, or maybe the actor didn't want to continue on to season 3. So it could be that, but it also seems very intentional to me that they're putting in these romance elements, that we have randomly, suddenly Fallou finds love, and then we have Angus and Fiona, and they're talking about how they found each other, how they fell in love, how they got married. There's just like a really heavy romance element going on right now. So Fallou tells the story about how he used to work in a hospital and he had basically a racist neighbor that didn't treat him very well. But after the apocalypse at some point, the neighbor brought his 2-year-old over because he thought, emphasis on the word thought, that the 2-year-old was dead. And he was asking Fallou for help because he knew that Fallou worked at a hospital. Fallou said that, no, her airway was just blocked, and so she wasn't breathing well, and he was able to revive her and get her breathing again. And even though the man didn't verbally thank him, he saw gratitude in his eyes. Then he talks about how there's only 2 kinds of people now, the living and the dead. All right. This is literally a story about a girl who they thought was dead, who was not, and they managed to revive her. I don't know if a blocked airway is, medically going to fit into Beth's story anywhere. It occurred to me that maybe that was a hint at something, but it also might not be. It could just be, this is what happened with the child, and it's completely different than what happened with Beth. But the point is, they, for some reason, wanted to tell us a story about a girl who was presumed dead. And he even says the man came carrying his daughter limply in his arms. Like he... you could almost just see that, almost like a bridal carry, except she's a 2-year-old, so she's very small in his arms, and he's like holding her out, and she's limp in his arms. I mean, that's like the image of Daryl carrying Beth out of the hospital. And they're saying in this case, with the little girl, she wasn't dead. She wasn't breathing, so she seemed to be dead, but she was not dead, and Fallou revived her. Again, why on earth would they want to put that story in this episode? It has nothing to do with anything, unless they are foreshadowing something. And obviously, Beth. Okay. So that was really important. Like I said, every single moment of this episode, they had something that I was just like having to pause and write stuff down, right? There's a ton of it. So Fallou and Akiva get firewood. She kisses him and she says it's a goodbye, but he asks her to come with him, but she doesn't want to go without her sister. And then she says, let's say goodbye again. So they make out. I thought that was really cute. It made me smile. So a couple of things here. It's not so much that Beth equated a kiss with goodbye, but I feel like this is a little bit of a callback to I didn't get to say goodbye. So there's that, because she's saying that she's saying goodbye to him. And then there's the sister thing. Okay, even that, I didn't think too much about it at first when Akila first talked about her sister, but literally we have someone who's searching for her sister, who doesn't want to leave without her sister. We've seen this a few times. I mean, obviously with Beth and Maggie in season 4 and early 5, but also we saw it with Connie and Kelly. So it's kind of a running theme, but it always feels like it's a callback to Beth. And they're doing this. I mean, another way to put it would be that she's looking for her sister, which feels like it equates to looking for Beth. It's a missing sister, let's put it that way, who she can't find. And now, while looking for her, she's found romance with Fallou. And I don't know, it just feels like it's going to translate into Daryl looking for Beth and then finding romance with her, even though the roles are a little bit different in that case. It just feels like they're really trying to tell us something and really trying to foreshadow something here. So then Carol leaves the building and Daryl and Codron talk by the fire. This particular conversation felt a lot like the conversation between Beth and Daryl on the porch in Still. Codron says he's sorry about what happened with Isabelle, and Daryl says she's probably in a better place now, though. I mean, it felt a little bit like when Beth and Daryl talked about Herschel. And then Codron says, so is my brother. So there's talk of his brother, kind of like Daryl talked to Beth about Merle. And then he talks about having to put his brother down and how it feels like when you do that, you kill a piece of your soul. Now, this was interesting for a few reasons. Daryl, I kind of thought that Daryl might say, I understand, I had to do the same thing with my brother or something. He doesn't. He doesn't actually talk about Merle here. But you can tell that he might be thinking that. And he does say, I can imagine, because he knows, he's been there. But I also wondered if that was a reference to the fact that he was never able to find Beth and put her down. You know, again, he thinks she turned into a walker and is wandering around somewhere. And I kind of had to think about maybe what they were trying to say with that. Obviously, he didn't get the closure he wanted because he would rather have, assuming that Beth is dead, he believes she's dead, he would rather have put her down and buried her and gotten the closure. And he's always seen that as a bad thing. And, we know it's not a bad thing because she's probably alive somewhere. But what if it had actually been worse if he had to put her down and that really would have shattered him in a way he couldn't recover from, And so it was just I'm not sure if that's what they're trying to say, but it was just really interesting to have this conversation about putting a walker down that is someone that you love and how most people, especially from Team Family, have always seen it as it's a responsibility and it's a better thing to do to put them down than to let them remain a walker, which I think is true, but we haven't really seen a discussion where they actually say that's really hard and that changes who you are to have to do that. They usually dwell more on the positive aspects of it than on the traumatizing aspects of it. So I just thought this was super interesting. And then he wants to know what happened when his brother was killed, and Daryl says he didn't kill his brother. That this description from Daryl is interesting. He says there's a skinny girl on the road with an old guy who tricked him into thinking he was blind. Now, that was like the first episode of the first season. I do remember that, but I haven't watched it in a while. But it almost feels like he could be talking about Beth there. He calls her a skinny girl and an old guy who was blind. Blind is always a serious thing, right? But she's the one who killed his brother. And of course, Codron is shocked because Janae told him that Daryl killed him. And this is the first time that Codron is hearing that that was not the case. So then Daryl goes and talks to Carol. They talk about how Ash and Laurent should have arrived by now, and maybe Ezekiel and Judith are showing them around, and it's just kind of a fun conversation. But then Carol gets upset, and she says, I can't remember her face. And she talks about how she only remembers Sophia coming out of the barn, and the old Sophia, when she was alive, who Carol raised, time has taken that Sophia from her. And all she has now is after the farm. So then she says it all got churned up again, her, Lizzie, Henry. And of course, Daryl says that's none of your fault and hugs her. And he says, we keep going, right? That's what we do. So this mostly informs Carol's inner arc. And Isabelle at the end during the episode Insider did mention this too. And he said, it's not that we're never going to see Sophia again or never have any Sophia stuff or Sophia mentions again, but this particular version of Sophia, specifically the thing where she couldn't remember Sophia, is going away. And of course, a lot of that is because of what happens in the final sequence, which I'll get to in a minute. But, this is a big deal because, once again, Carol doesn't really talk to people about Sophia. And, I've mentioned this before, but in season 4, she talked very briefly with Rick about her. But that was only because Rick kind of pushed her into it. He says, why don't you ever say her name? And then she did. She said Sophia, but it was just to make him happy, and then she just says, well, she's gone. Why should I? But I don't think since then she's really mentioned Sophia. And of course, there's probably off-camera times when she has, probably she told Ezekiel about her when they were married and living together at the kingdom, but we don't see her talk to people about Sophia. So not only did we have her talk to Ash about Sophia, which granted was a lie, but it's still a big deal that she talked about her, but she instigated this conversation with Daryl. He didn't have to push her into it. He didn't have to ask her questions. She talked to him about it. And that's a big deal. It shows that she's starting to work through some of her pain and some of her old demons because she's not avoiding it anymore. She's talking about it and she's allowing herself to feel the pain and to cry about it. The only other note I have for this part is that they do mention the farm. It's a farm reference, which obviously is a Beth reference. So then they all go to the coast and they decide to go through the channel. One of the very first things I noticed here were the train tracks. There are train tracks leading through the channel, and that's a big deal. That's a big symbol. Of course, Akila is going to stay, so they all say goodbye to her, but Fallou decides to stay with her. So he's going to help her find her sister, I'm assuming. And we have the romance angle. They hold hands. Oh, they do the hand hold just like in Alone, where they interlace their fingers. And their hands are even like, I mean, you can do that in different ways, out to the side or with your knuckles facing up, but they do it down between them in exactly the same way Beth and Daryl did in season 4. So that was a big callback. And I think it's especially important that Daryl looks back at them. So they're standing there holding hands and everybody else goes into the tunnel and Daryl stops and looks back. And again, it's because he's looking for love. He's watching them. He's appreciating what is happening there. But it's also a foreshadow, once again, because of the way season 1 started with Judith saying, you deserve happiness too. It's clear that he's going to find it before the end of the spin-off series. So however many seasons they do, however long it is, that's where we're headed. And so this is just another foreshadow of that. And the fact that they held hands that way, it's like Daryl is looking back at them and he has to be thinking of Beth because he's never held hands with anyone like that except her. We didn't see him hold hands like that with Leah or with Isabelle, right? And so that was, to me, it's not only a callback, it's also a foreshadow and a really big hint. All right, so then they go into the tunnel. We see bats. Carol steps in the guano, which Fiona says is psychoactive. Then they see a checkpoint. So the checkpoint's interesting. I've been wondering, and I've mentioned it once or twice, whether everything in Diverged with Daryl finding the walkers that were in camo, that were like military walkers, if that has already been fulfilled or not. I mean, it theoretically could have been because Janae's people, Sabine, a lot of them were very militaristic. Codron was definitely a soldier when we first see him. So I was going, well, maybe it was foreshadowing that. But now after seeing this, I'm telling you that hasn't been fulfilled yet. They're still showing us that. They're still showing us walkers that are dressed in army fatigues, and this is a foreshadow for them moving forward, right? So that's really important. I was really interested in that, the camouflage walkers. And then once Angus turns on the generator, there's army tents. This is a big deal, guys, okay? We saw army tents, the green army tents, and especially ones that are used as MASH units, like the medical tents. We saw them in 401 at the big spot. And remember, that was the first full episode that Gimple was in charge of. He actually took over at 316 and redid a lot of that. But this was the first episode that, he 100% was the showrunner for, planned start to finish, all of that. And we saw those there at the big spot. Then we saw them again in the parking lot of Grady. Okay, so this is another way that you can see that they have been planning this arc for a really, really long time. In the first episode that Gimple was showrunner over in 401, they were already planning whatever these army tents are pointing to. And the fact that we saw them in the parking lot at Grady means that they're tied up in Beth's arc. And I think it probably represents either the organization we will find her with or something that has to happen before they find her again. So in 401, it was a foreshadow. In 508, Coda, it was telling us what to look for when we will see her again. And now we've got them here as they're closing out season 2, heading into season 3. That's important. Daryl does find a couple of masks, and I was kind of surprised he didn't pick them up at first. He just says, let's keep moving. And I'm wondering if it's because there were only 2 and he knew there were not enough for everyone, so he was just kind of hoping they could push through without them, but that does not go well. They find the bioluminescence. They look like fireflies. Some of the walkers have light in their throats. I thought that was kind of a cool effect. But they all start seeing things and falling down. Obviously, it's wearing on them. And because they're being loud, some of the walkers begin to wake up. They start shooting walkers, killing walkers. Okay, so we have this thing where we were told that there would be a certain line where Daryl said Beth's name. He also said Merle and Glenn's names. And clearly that did not make it into the final episode. But This ending was a little bit strange, specifically where Daryl was concerned, because they focus on everybody else's hallucinations and not his. What I mean by that is there actually is a walker that he starts to kill. So he starts using the Morning Star, and he goes to kill this walker, and he stops. He hesitates, and he looks at it. And I was thinking, because it was clearly not like a Beth walker. It was a male walker. It was big. You know, it was not reminiscent of Beth, like one of those blonde female walkers. So I was thinking maybe he was thinking of Merle, and that this reminded him a little bit of Merle. I mean, Michael Rooker is bigger than Norman is, you know, stature-wise. He's taller. So I was thinking that. And it's not that it looked particularly like Merle, but I was thinking that maybe that's what he was thinking. I don't know if that's what he was thinking, because he stops, and he stares at it, and he hesitates, and then after a minute, he kind of pulls out of it and shakes himself and still kills it using the Morning Star. And that is the only, at least until he sees Isabelle, that's like really the only place that they focus on Daryl having hallucinations with this stuff. So I feel like they sort of planned it in a way that they were going to do more with him. I mean, obviously, because there was that line that they cut out, but it's kind of juxtaposed with Codron seeing a walker that looks like his brother. So it would have made sense to do a Merle walker here to kind of line those two things up, but it's like they kind of did it, but then they kind of shied away from it. And I'm not sure why that is. I wish that they hadn't. I would have liked that better, even if it was them focusing on Merle rather than Beth. I mean, obviously, I would like Beth more, but even if they had focused on Merle, I still would have liked that more. It would have been going more into Daryl's hallucinations, and they just didn't do that. And I'm not sure why. I mean, on the one hand, it might have been because this is Book of Carol and they just wanted to focus more on her. On the other hand, we do have the thing with Isabelle, and maybe they just thought that was enough and they didn't want to do too many things right here or something. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they decided not to do it. But I did notice that he hesitated before killing that particular walker. Codron, meanwhile, well, Carol sees the Sophia walker, and she goes through a yellow door, which is important, and then Carol follows her. Then Codron sees the walker that looks like his brother, and he refuses to kill it, but it's real close to biting him, and so Daryl kills it, and then Codron freaks out and attacks Daryl for killing his brother. And at this point, I had to laugh a couple of times just because poor Daryl could not catch a break. I mean, people kept attacking him. I was like, okay, this poor guy. I'll get into that in a minute, but so we have Carol following the Sophia walker, and I think the yellow door is important because yellow door always equals escape or, something leading to resurrection. Now, obviously, Sophia isn't going to be resurrected physically, but the fact that Carol could see her face again, where she said she couldn't before, and that she sort of works through this particular issue that she's having, I think that's what the yellow door is about. In this case, it's about the memory of Sophia being resurrected in Carol's mind. And that's actually really cool. That's an awesome symbol right there. But what actually happens is, so there's something really interesting that happens here, and I'm not even entirely sure I have fixed in my head what it means, but she sees Sophia going through the door ahead of her, and then she sees all of these other walkers closing in behind Sophia and coming toward her. So it's like they're between her and Sophia, coming at Carol. Now, at first, Carol sees a walker that looks like her. Now, we have seen this before. The biggest one that comes to mind is Michonne in season 4 sees a walker that looks like her when she's got her pets and she's walking with the walkers after the prison. And that usually shows that they're in a very, very destructive frame of mind. You know what I mean? They're very numb. They're not walking with the living, as it were. They're very fixated on the dead. And it's just, they got to pull themselves out of that or they're going to end up actually dying. And so Michonne did in season 4, and then she went looking for Rick and Carl. And it's kind of similar here. We know that Carol's been in a negative state of mind, and the fact that she's following Sophia, and as we'll see as things progress, she asks Sophia if she can come with her. So she's basically wanting to die. So this is why she's seeing herself, I think, as a walker, because inside she feels like she's dead. And so the way that she is perceiving that outwardly is to see herself as a walker, which is really interesting. It's very, very interesting psychologically how they show that. Anyway, but then I noticed something, and I went back and rewatched it a couple of times because I wanted to make sure that I'd seen it correctly. So we first see the walker that looks like Carol, as though she's looking at herself as a walker. Then that walker disappears briefly, and in its place, it turns into a female walker with long blonde hair. In other words, it's a Beth walker. That's interesting. And then I was trying to figure out what happened to that walker. It doesn't show it directly. It's like the camera is behind the walkers as she's killing them, so it's hard to see. But it looks to me, because there's 4 in total, and it looks to me like she kills the other 3. The last one that she doesn't kill is the Beth walker. And she kind of pushes it down on the ground, and then when it shows that walker's face, it's the Carol walker again. So this walker is like phasing back and forth between looking like Carol and looking like Beth. And then she fights with the Carol walker on the ground, and she almost kills it. She raises the knife as though she's going to kill it, but then she doesn't. And then the camera pans back, and there's not even actually a walker there. It's just her kneeling on the ground. And I was like, whoa, okay. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it's interesting that she's seeing herself as dead, and then she sees a Beth walker, and then it's gone. And then it turns back into her. It just feels like they're trying to say something about the way that Carol and Beth are all tangled up in their arcs. I mean, they were both at Grady, right? And then Beth was just gone, and Carol's lost all of these kids, and Carol feels like she's dead inside, and it's just all so jumbled up. But it's really, really interesting the way that they show that. And it kind of blew me away that there was not a walker there, because I was expecting either to see a walker that didn't look like either of them. It was just another walker and she was hallucinating what it looked like. Or I thought it would be interesting if it actually was the Beth walker and she was seeing herself that way. Maybe because, again, she thinks Beth is dead, so she's seeing herself as the dead walker that looks like Beth or something like that. But then it panned out and there wasn't a walker there at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did not expect that. So that was really, really interesting. Let's see, where am I in my notes here? So she looks up at that point and sees Sophia again, and Sophia is not a walker anymore, so she can see her face. And then Sophia turns to leave, and Carol says, "Has it been so long?" And Sophia runs back and hugs her, and then she says, "Can I come with you?" And Sophia lets go and goes through the yellow door by herself, but Carol smiles. So I talked about this a little bit in one of my more recent videos, that I think the reason that Norman liked this episode so much and the reason he hyped it so much is because we see them really fighting with themselves in a way that we usually don't see them do. So Daryl and Carol are the ultimate survivors, right? And they may be in a dark place a lot, but they never just lie down and die. They never lie down and give up, no matter what is going on. And in this moment, both of them really came close to giving up. Okay, I mean, Carol was asking Sophia, "Can I come with you?" And she had to make a choice. If she had really wanted to give up and go with her, she could have. She could have died there if she'd wanted to. You could argue that Daryl would have gone and found her and dragged her out and been like, "Nope, not happening," and maybe that would have happened. But it was like she had the opportunity to choose whether she wanted to die right here or not. And maybe that has something to do with her not killing herself as a walker. I was going to say, this actually feels like it also ties back to what Codron was saying about how if you put someone down you care about, it kills a piece of yourself. Maybe if she had killed herself as a walker, even though it was a hallucination, it would have meant she died physically as well because she was killing herself. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here about what this might mean. But the fact that she smiles, I mean, she told Daryl specifically that she couldn't remember Sophia's face. And in this moment, it's like she was able to remember Sophia's face. So like I said, the memory of Sophia and what she looked like was resurrected for Carol. And that was enough to help her work through things and say, okay, I'm all right now and I can keep going. Daryl goes through something really similar. I mean, it looks a little different for him, of course, because they're different characters, but it is very similar. So I was saying that poor Daryl couldn't catch a break. First, Codron attacked him, which Daryl didn't expect. I mean, they're kind of buddies now, but it's because Codron is hallucinating. And then Codron stabs him, for one thing. I was like, oh, geez. And then he finally gets Codron. He doesn't really get him off of him, but Codron goes chasing the hallucination of his brother. So then Daryl runs back to get the masks because he realizes how bad, whatever it is they're breathing in is. And he's like tripping and stumbling, trying to get there because it's affecting him physically. He finally gets there and gets the mask. And then Fiona and Fergus show up or Angus, sorry, not Fergus, hit him with a shovel in the face and then kick him in the ribs. And then I was like, wow, Daryl cannot catch a break right now. He's getting the crap kicked out of him. So they try to make off with the masks. And it's at this point that the same thing kind of happens with Daryl. He's laying there thinking, okay, is this even worth it? Maybe I should just call it good. Laurent is safe. Isabelle died. Maybe I'm just done. But this is where we see Isabelle and the hallucination of Isabelle. And she says that he thinks that he's had enough, that there's nothing left inside him. But then she says, but you won't die here. And she picks up his grandfather's dog tags, which he's wearing around his neck. And she says, not like him. And then he looks over and sees his grandfather. So again, I think this is what Norman likes so much about this episode. There's a lot of really deep psychological work going on here. And I do think that it's really, really beautiful. Would I have preferred that we see Beth? I mean, obviously. But I actually really did love the storyline. And I loved the way they brought it together. I mean, the storyline having to do with his grandfather and him not wanting to die on a far shore away from home and away from his family. That was very tied up in France, the France storyline. And Isabelle says that too, that they were trying to come up with a good resolution for Daryl's storyline in France. And this is how they're doing it. They're bookending it with his realizations about his grandfather. So think of it this way. He was almost afraid of dying in France because he was afraid of becoming his grandfather who never made it home to his family. And then in this moment, when he falls down and doesn't get up, he comes really close to becoming his grandfather by laying there and dying and not getting back up again. And then Isabelle, or the ghost of Isabelle, the spirit of Isabelle, the hallucination, whatever you want to call it, she gives him inspiration to get back up and says, nope, you're not going to die here like him. That's not what your destiny is. And then she says the bet on hope thing. And that gives him the drive he needs to jump up and take down Fiona and Angus and keep going, And then she sees him, he sees her one more time standing there, and she smiles at him and says, I'm going to butcher this, but it's bon courage, Monsieur Dixon. So she's just telling him to have courage. And then she walks away, and he sees her walk away. So one other thing I was thinking of, I've talked about the hallucination motif before, and specifically we see them talk about mushrooms, right? And I've talked about how it's a little bit, we haven't entirely pinned down what it means other than, the obvious hallucinations. But there are times when they talk about mushrooms, or, we see mushrooms, or there's a mushroom reference of some kind where people aren't actually hallucinating in the show. So it's not always actual hallucinations like we have here. And we didn't actually see mushrooms here that I know of. They were just actually hallucinating. And I mean, there was the bioluminescent algae. Maybe there's some form of mushroom involved in that. I don't know. But I think very often what it is about is somebody not seeing something clearly, not seeing the truth. So it's like a symbolic hallucination in the sense that you're not seeing things clearly, right? And so, for example, an example I always use is, it's actually in one of those Governor episodes. I think it's in episode 405. They are walking, and it's before the Governor reconnects with the guy that used to work for him. I'm blanking on his name. Latino guy. Anyway, right before that, it's Lily and Tara and Lily's daughter. I'm not remembering her name, and the Governor. And Tara is telling some story about this girl that she really liked and wanted to have a relationship with, and they were kind of having a relationship, like they were just starting one, and then they ate some mushrooms and got kind of silly because of it, like got kind of high because of it. And then she realized that this girl not only didn't like her and was lying about her feelings, but this girl wasn't even gay. She wasn't even into other women. She liked men. And so that was something that Tara was really hurt by. And, it was just a story she was telling. But I think the reason they referenced the mushrooms there is that Tara was laboring under a deception, and she wasn't seeing things clearly. And then the mushrooms actually brought that out. So they're almost using the mushrooms. And this is what occurred to me when I was watching this episode. The mushrooms actually show truth in a way. The hallucination shows truth and shakes loose maybe what they weren't seeing clearly before. And I think that's what happens here. They all start hallucinating, and Carol is able to actually see Sophia's face, and Daryl is actually able to understand that he's not going to be his grandfather, and that gives him the drive to keep going. You see what I mean? It's like it actually reveals some sort of truth to them. Anyway, that's just what I was thinking about when I watched it. But I really did like this whole sequence. I did think the thing where he saw his grandfather, it's really, I mean, the crazy thing about it, and this really has nothing to do with TWD, but he's looking at this representation of his grandfather who was just a young man and died in the war. And I mean, this guy was probably 19, you know, and obviously Daryl's older than that, but it's his grandfather. And so there's just something so haunting and just lovely about that. And I really did like this sequence. I thought it was super cool. And as I keep saying, I think that's kind of what Norman was talking about when he said it's just like the greatest hour of TWD, because he likes that inner arc, and he's saying that this was just really beautiful, the way that they shored all of this up, and they kind of bookended it with the stuff about Daryl's grandfather. And I have to agree. I think it's really, really great. Even though all of us were hoping it would be a Beth thing, I think that's why he said that. Oh, it's also really sweet that as Isabelle walks away, as the specter of her walks away, that he sees fireflies around her. I thought that was sweet. Then Carol finds him, and they both have masks now. And she says, let's go home. And as they're walking away, they play the song, You Can't Always Get What You Want, but sometimes you get what you need. So in terms of home, there's just a lot of references to home. And, you know, we've talked about what that means before. It means being where your family is, being where the people you love are. But remember that in season 5B, after Coda, we had the symbolism of the wolves show up. They didn't actually try to bulldoze Alexandria until the beginning of season 6, but we saw the wolf trap, we saw Red Poncho Guy, and there was, Daryl and Aaron getting caught in the wolf trap in the van, which we saw a replay of that in this second season of Daryl Dixon. But what I was going to say is that we saw those tanker trucks, or their semi-trucks, I guess, that have the whole how the harvest gets home words on the side of them, right? And most of us were thinking that that was a Beth thing, and I still think that it is. I still think what they were symbolizing there, I mean, it didn't obviously literally mean that she was going to show up with that group that called themselves wolves. If she were, she would have. But it's a foreshadow of what's to come. Remember that in Diverged, when he's fixing his bike, and that's after he sees the military walkers, he hears a wolf howl. So whatever that symbolism is, it does have something to do with how Beth's going to return. And so with Carol saying, let's go home, I think that, yeah, I mean, she's in a literal sense talking about let's get back to the States, let's get back to the Commonwealth or Alexandria, where Laurent is, where Ezekiel is, all of that. But symbolically, Beth is Daryl's home. So her saying let's go home is let's go find Beth, symbolically, even though they don't consciously know that's what they're going to be doing. And finally, the final image of them is them walking through the tunnel, and it's very, very green. So I think that's important too. All right. Then we had the Insider. I think I already talked about. Oh, okay. So one thing they said in the Insider was that they're kind of pushing the idea that maybe things are better in England than they are in France, and that's why they should go there. And, hopefully there they can get a ride home back to the States. But that just reminded me of season 5 and Eugene saying that they should go to DC because things would be better there. The way that they said it in the episode Insider sounded exactly like that. Oh, well, if there's anywhere that things are better, it would probably be England, so we should go there and see if things are better. And that's exactly what was happening in season 5 with DC. And not that I'm thinking that everything's going to be hunky-dory in England or anything. And I don't think they're going to spend much time in England. I think they're just going to be there for a minute because most of season 3 is going to be filmed in Spain, or is going to supposedly be set in Spain. But I think it's just another callback to season 5, another way that they're replaying things before Beth shows up. So that was the only thing other than just Zabel saying that Carol seeing Sophia is like them finally getting rid of this particular demon that she's been dealing with in not being able to remember Sophia's face. He just talked about having resolution to that, and also having resolution to the Daryl storyline in France and how they use the grandfather to do that. So not a whole lot from the episode Insider. Anyway, I think that is all my notes right now. Looks like I'm keeping it right about an hour, but I really did like the finale. Hopefully we don't have to wait too long for season 3. It sucks that we didn't see her this season, but I have every confidence that we still will. We are on track. They are replaying everything. And one thing that we've said multiple times is that it did definitely feel like the script in which we saw Daryl say Beth's name was leaked purposefully. And we can't help but wonder if they leaked it specifically because they knew they were taking the line out, but they wanted people to know that in some iteration of the finale, he had said that. And there's nobody who cares about that as much as we do, right? So we do think that that was leaked pretty much for our benefit. And they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't need to do that if that's not where they were going with it. So, especially these last 3 episodes, all of the clues and all of the replays and all of the callbacks and the dialogue parallels and everything just goes to show that this is where they're headed and we are on track. We just have to wait a little bit longer for it. So let me know what you guys thought of the finale, and I will still be around doing ask videos and that sort of thing, and possibly writing a fan fiction, hopefully. And yeah, I'm with you guys, and we're just still waiting to see her. Talk to you soon.